Right, hello everyone. I am the digital manager here at ODI. For those of you that don't know ODI, it's a leading global development think tank. It's focusing on evidence-based policy to reduce poverty in Africa, Asia, wherever poverty exists. I've been here now for 6 or 7 years, generally in the digital role, and have developed this strategy, the one I'm outlining today. So, for the past 15 years, think tanks have reaped the benefits of the internet. It's made our messages easier to be heard and found. Instead of working through broadcasters, publishers, and libraries, we've been able to go it alone. We can be the producers, the broadcasters, the publishers, the libraries, just by creating websites and sending email shots out. To take advantage of those newfound abilities, we've bolted on digital outputs and methods, the fourth element, to our existing ways of working. We've published the print outputs we already produce online. We've streamed the events we already hold to an online audience. We've pitched the same articles to new online media, and we've hired website officers to work alongside our existing communications staff. To the extent that we are digital organizations, it is by our design. Our core processes, systems, and people haven't changed much. I'm not sure this bolt-on approach works for the future. Sure, we can be the producer, the broadcaster, the publisher, and the library, but without changing the product we're offering, is anyone interested? I don't think so. I think that think tanks preparing for themselves for the future should be asking whether think tanks can move from being digital by design to digital by default. What does that mean? Well, for many years, the Guardian newspaper was digital by design. It had a team of people uploading the articles they wrote to the paper from the paper to the web. I was one of them for a while. It is a strategy that worked well at getting readers. However, it's a poor business model. It wasn't quite a traditional newspaper, nor was it as dynamic and low cost as the Huffington Post. Now the Guardian is more digital by default. Every journalist has to produce for their digital channels. Digital savvy is a core competency. The deadlines they work to are not based on the paper version, but on a constant production cycle for the website, the phone app, the Facebook newsfeed. In fact, they're seriously discussing the end of their print edition. In these changes, they're hoping to sow the seeds of their survival. It is a subject I'm sure John will develop further when in his talk about The Economist. But what about think tanks? Well, Francis Maud has said that digital is not a channel, it is the delivery choice of a generation. His unit is overseeing a digital by default strategy for the government. Like The Guardian, we think tanks need to change our core product to reach this generation. We need to deliver our messages to them, whether they are on Facebook, email, their iPad, a mobile device, or anywhere else for that matter. But also, like The Guardian, this will require changes in our processes, our systems, and our people. Changes that move us from being digital by design to digital by default. Today I'm focusing on how ODI Communications is trying to make that change. Our strategy has 4 pillars. I call them Cradle to Grey, Being There, Reusing the Wheel, and Revolutionary Evolution. The first of those 4 pillars aims to make, sorry, one second, there we go. First of those 4 pillars aims to make online networking and communications activities central to the entire research process. I call it Cradle to Grey because it targets the fostering, the maturing, and the aging of research ideas and projects. At each stage, researchers can be empowered by digital products and tools to make their messages stronger, their reach greater, their influence longer lasting. First comes the cradle. This is the time when research ideas are being fostered. As with our babies, research ideas in their infancy can benefit with interactions with others. So I encourage researchers to network. They can employ systems like LinkedIn or Twitter to build a community of people interested in their research. These people deliver creative ideas, ardent criticisms, and further connections to more interesting people. The actual process of researching can be digital too. Researchers can use Wiki to work collaboratively, or they can build resource libraries through tools like Mendeley. By opening up their research process, they're developing a stronger research product. But not only that, they have a ready-made set of champions to communicate their research in future. Obviously, these tools require new skills and competencies from them. the communications team can provide support to skill them up in Twitter and other tools, and we have our media man Jonathan sitting with us who does this ably. But more drastic action might be needed to truly embed digital working. For example, should think tanks be hiring researchers based on their digital profiles and their digital expertise? After the cradle comes maturity. And there we go. Oh, there we go.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's struggling.
Okay, we'll do this manually. There we go. Move that along. There we go. Comes maturity. This is a time when research is notionally complete. Traditionally, this is the point at which a report would be published. Now a researcher should encourage a flourishing of life. They can publish their work in one of many formats: podcast, video, blog, infographic. It's not only that. Even for a report, the endpoint shouldn't be just a PDF file. ODI will soon be implementing new production systems and processes that can output text in whatever format is appropriate for the reader, be that a web page, an ebook, a PDF, or something else entirely. Again, there's a learning curve for our people to get used to these tools. With so many potential formats to choose from, choosing the right one and messaging it appropriately is essential. When we need to reach the media, we need Jonathan on board to hone the message. But sometimes we're aiming to influence academics, for example, in which case we might concentrate on making our data more accessible to those users. Finally, let's see if this works. No. There we go. Finally comes the grey. This is the lifespan of research once it's completed. Research on the internet is immortal. It never goes to the grave. It just gets elderly and grey around the edges. But old does not mean useless. Research findings can be posted to Wikipedia, which enshrines them in the greatest knowledge store of the modern age. ODI does this for all our briefing papers and encourages researchers to include updating Wikipedia as part of the deliverables of their research projects. Research papers and associated data can be released under a Creative Commons license, encouraging reuse of it by others in their work. I'm hoping that ODI implements a data transparency policy later this year and uses Creative Commons as our standard license too. So while research may grow old, if research projects are planned with long-term visibility in mind, the work they produce can be seeing impact for years to come. There shouldn't be any dusty bookshelves in the digital world. Okay, there it goes. It's just the second pillar of our strategy is called being there. Think tanks sell ideas. Ideas are based on research, but ideas that aim to change the world. But you can't sell ideas in the same way as you would a car or an iPhone. Apple and Ford have lots of money to do that. So they will always be able to use their income to shout louder and harder, which means we have to be clever if our ideas are going to be heard. Our response to this challenge is to return to first principles of communications, which is exactly what Richard just said. You wouldn't create a radio station to reach listeners of the BBC, so why do we post to every blog we wrote to our own website? We shouldn't. Instead, we follow an approach called being there. We don't expect people to come to content on our platforms. Instead, we push information to them through the online channels they already use. How does it work in practice? Well, we always try to post information to the most appropriate sites. Sometimes it's The Guardian. Sometimes it's actually a site a competitor runs. We don't worry about that at all. We've used Twitter and Facebook from day one, and it's a core part of our media function to reach audiences through these networks. And finally, and very importantly, we aim to make everything available by email. It is the one tool that everyone checks every day. So to make being there work, it's important you have someone on board who can help bridge the gap between academic content researchers produce and the newsier feel of many of the channels. Step in Jonathan again. But we also have to encourage the researchers themselves to think through and use their contacts and connections. They live in their sector, so if we're trying to post something to meet the audience for a sector, they should know which channels their peers read and visit most. Finally, you need to think about the processes and systems that facilitate being there. We only post a blog on the ODI site when we can't find a suitable alternative, which means that we've added that step into the blog writing process, that step of searching. And the ODI site is built from the ground up, not to care whether the content it is linking to is on the ODI site or anywhere else. The next pillar, reusing the wheel. As a not-for-profit, every penny we spend must be accounted for. But many online initiatives can be seen as expensive. Organizations can spend tens of thousands building websites for new projects and developing new systems for niche interests. Just within the international development arena, I know of at least 2 expensively developed bespoke professional networks, and all they do is act as a poor man's LinkedIn. Needless to say, LinkedIn does the job better and is used more as a result, and these were very poor investments. For me, there was no way we would get our strategy taken up internally if it cost too much. So I made it a point of principle that we wouldn't spend money on anything we could get for free. We wouldn't reinvent the wheel, we should reuse what we had available to us wherever we could. For example, commercial companies release free tools for consumers all the time. So why would we pay a website developer to recreate the functionality you can get on WordPress.com or on Google Sites or any other tool of that kind? Our most successful project sites, Climate Funds Update and Post2015.org, are both built on these free tools. Private individuals release vast quantities of content under Creative Commons licenses. So why should we pay for photo libraries when we can use Flickr or Wikimedia? Almost all images on the ODI website come from talented amateurs or other organizations who've posted them using Creative Commons licenses. Our intranet already works on Microsoft SharePoint. So why would we pay tens of thousands for a new digital production system to hold details of our publications and events? No, it wasn't necessary. We use SharePoint. The approach made it possible to deliver the whole strategy on around £5,000 over the first 2 years. At a time that we didn't have any money coming from our organization and money was tight, we managed to make a lot of change happen. But it isn't just about using other people's work, it's about putting in too. So when we learn something or have to build something new because it doesn't already exist, we should also release it for others. If that isn't possible, we should at the very least document what we've done so that others can replicate it. The final pillar is about the way change happens. And in ODI, I feel it has to be revolutionary evolution. Why revolution? Well, I've been talking about wholesale changes to the processes, the systems, and the people of the organization. That's massive business change, and ODI could be transformed as a result. That's pretty revolutionary, but it's also scary. So while we're aiming for revolutionary change, we deliver it piecemeal, in a more evolutionary manner. We ask ourselves, what should success look like in a few years' time? And if that doesn't feel revolutionary enough, then we need to set a more ambitious course. But then we also ask ourselves, what does success look like next week, next month, next year? And if that doesn't feel achievable, we probably need to be more pragmatic. So to make change happen, we do 3 things. Firstly, employ arguments and evidence to convince people change is in their interest. That's what I'm doing here today, and it's what I do internally for ODI. I've tried to be a voice for change. I've built up arguments about why change is necessary, often couched in fairly academic language to help establish my credibility internally. Every part of the digital strategy is documented, and I present it regularly at internal discussions. We've also built a strong monitoring and evaluation dashboard to feed back to researchers where their work has been successful and where it hasn't. By moving past reporting just downloads to telling a story about how wider digital engagement builds reach and usage of their work, we're highlighting for them the incentives in participating in change. It also sometimes builds a little professional jealousy that can be very useful. Second, we aim for a net gain for the staff, not just the organization, when we introduce new processes. When I'm setting out a change process to deliver digital gains, I start by understanding their current ways of working. Change can and should save them time and effort. They should be able to do more through change. That's how ODI's first digital production system was created. Over the course of 3 years, we replaced different stores of content people had created for themselves all over the shop. And we put in place a central one that was a lot easier for them to understand and manage and see across. When we were finished, we had a digital by default process that was easier for them to use. A process where everyone in ODI is involved in adding details of events, publications, projects, and these details are the ones that feed our website, our intranet, our social media channels, and our news feeds. Third, we introduce new systems that build on what we have and what is available. So I've already talked about this when I mentioned reusing the wheel. There are lots of systems out there that can be used already with minimal cost and effort. A cheap or free system is much less likely to encounter resistance from those that think money could be spent better. Better still is a system that you already have and that people already use. So our monitoring and evaluation dashboard is a good example. We built it using a tool called ClickView, which our finance team had already purchased for their financial monitoring. We're just embarking on a project of moving our contacts management system across to the same system our finance team use for managing their contacts and that all of the relevant administrators in the organisation use. So trying to build on what they know to achieve what we need to achieve. Is that moving? So, I hope the 4 pillars I outlined, cradle to grey, being there, reusing the wheel, and revolutionary evolution, can act as sort of catalysts for think tanks that are trying to become digital by default, to change their business, to change the way they do their processes, the systems that they use, and the people. I think it's starting to make a change at ODI. I think we've still got a long way to go, but I'd be very interested to see how the rest of you and what different types of organisations feel about how much change is possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. Some great ideas there. Certainly intend to try some of them out. One of the things we wanted to do with this event was focus on learning from other sectors as well, and I think we've had a lot of great presentations so far from Richard and Nick about how think tanks can adapt to digital. The Economist is a publication which is also undergoing significant change. The entire media industry is indeed, and John here is going to talk about what he's been doing as homepage editor at The Economist to help manage that transition. He's also going to talk a little bit about the opportunities that the digital revolution presents for us in terms of looking at data and making sense of the world around us. So, are you ready?
I think I'm good to go, yeah.